Chapter 1. The Prehistoric Period. The prehistoric period in the history of mankind can roughly be dated from 20 lakh BC to about 3500 to 2500 BC, when the first civilization began to take shape. The first modern human beings on the Homo sapiens set foot on the Indian subcontinent anywhere between 20,000 BC and 40,000 BC, and they soon spread throughout a large part of the subcontinent, including peninsular India. Man is said to have appeared on the earth in the early Pleistocene between 20,000 and 10 years before the present. It is now well established that the earliest human fossils found in Africa dated back to about 42 lakh years. These specimens show that the earliest human beings were shorter in height and had a smaller brain. The humans evolved over a period of these 42 lakhs years, and the present form reached about 50,000 years ago. The regular use of tools beginning 26 lakhs years ago in East Africa is well attested and accompanies many earlier and later hominin fossils, except the solarity find of a hominid fossil from Hathanaura in the Narmada Valley. No early human fossils have been found in India due to the climatic conditions. According to the estimation of experts, cranial capacity of the fossil is equal to that of Homo erectus. The various sastra of the Shivalik hills containing stone tools have been dated between 20 lakh years and 12 lakh years ago. Another scientific data of the early stone tools came from the archaeological site of Bori in Pune district of Maharashtra, which is 13 lakhs and 80,000 years old. Stone Age. The age when the prehistoric man began to use stones for utilitarian purpose is termed as the Stone Age, on the basis of the specialization of the stone tools, which were made during that time. The Stone Age is divided into three broad divisions. First one, Paleolithic Age or the Old Stone Age. Second one, Mesolithic Age or the Middle Stone Age. Third one, Neolithic Age or the New Stone Age. Paleolithic Age. Paleolithic culture of India developed in the Paleolithic scene period of the Ice Age. Animal remains found in the Belen Valley in Mirzapur district in Uttar Pradesh shows that goats, sheep and cattle were exploited in Paleolithic Age. The human beings living in the Paleolithic Age were essentially food gatherers and depended on nature for food. The art of hunting and stalking wild animals individually and later in groups led to these people making stone weapons and tools. Crudely carved out stones were used in hunting, but as the size of the group began to increase and these were need for more food, these people began to make specialized tools by flaking stones, which were pointed one end. These kind of tools were generally used to kill small animals and for tearing flesh from the carcass of the hunted animals. The basic technique of making these crude tools were by taking a stone and flaking its sides with a behavior stone. The tools were characteristic of a Paleolithic age and were very rough. Human beings had come to make and use fire by this time. Based on tool technology, and Paleolithic age in India is divided into three phases. These phases are Lower Paleolithic culture, Middle Paleolithic culture, Upper Paleolithic culture, Mesolithic age. Lower Paleolithic culture. Dates available from various sites indicate that the Lower Paleolithic culture or the early Stone Age was quite widespread phenomenon between 5,000 and 50,000 its characteristic features, used of hand axes, clevers and choppers. The raw materials used for making these stone tools are various kinds of stone like quartzite, chet, and sometimes even quartz and bezels, etc. The lower Paleolithic tools have been found over a large area, virtually from all over India except the plains of the India, Saraswati, Brahmaputra, and Ganga, where raw material in the form of stone is not available. Lower Paleolithic sites of the several types: habitation sites, factory sites associated with sources of raw materials, sites that combine elements of both these functions, and open air in sites of any of these categories subsequently. Some of the important sites of Lower Paleolithic culture are Falgam in Kashmir, Belan Valley in Allahabad, Bhimbetik and Adamgarh in Hoshgarban district, 16R and Singsangi Talav in Nagaur district, Nevasa in Ahmedabad Nagar district, Husangi in Gulbarga district, and the famous site of Athirampakam, Tamil Nadu. Middle Paleolithic culture. The Middle Paleolithic culture can be dated between 15,000 BC and 40,000 BC or even slightly later on the basis of scientific dates. Its characteristic features and industries mainly based on flakes. The Middle Paleolithic tools technology is characterized basically by the flake tool industry. The tools are made on flakes obtained by striking them out from pebbles and cobbles. The tool types include small and medium-sized hand axes, clevers, and various kinds of scrapers, borers, and knives. The tools show regional variation, both the times of available raw material as well as shapes and sizes. Some of the most important sites of Middle Paleolithic period is Bambetka, Nevesa, Pushkar, Rohiri Hills of upper side, and Samsapur and Narmada. Upper Paleolithic culture. The Middle Paleolithic culture slowly evolved into the Upper Paleolithic culture. From the scientific dates available from the various sites, one may safely say that Upper Paleolithic culture lasted from about 40,000 BC to 10,000 BC. Upper Paleolithic culture is characterized by use of blades and burins. It appears that the concept of composite tools starts developing during the cultural period. One of the most remarkable discovery of the Upper Paleolithic period is that of a rubber-built, roughly circular platform of about 85 centimeters in diameter. The Upper Paleolithic culture tools have been found in Rajasthan, part of the Ganga and Belem valleys, central and western India, Gujarat and Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. The main tool types of scrapers, points, shovels, burins, burners, knives, etc. Mesolithic Age. Paleolithic Age came to an end with the end of Ice Age around 9000 BC. An intermediate stage in Stone Age culture began in 9000 BC, called Mesolithic Age or Middle Stone Age. The simple-handled stone tools were now attached to their branches from trees with rope made from animal skin and sinew. These tools are known as hand axes, which could be flung at fast-moving animals from a distance. Apart from hand axes, they also produced crude stone-tipped wooden spears, borers, and bunins. The characteristic tools of a Mesolithic age are microliths. The microlithic tools are characterized by parallel-sided blades taken out from prepared cores of such fine material as chet, chalcedony, crystal, jasper, cornelian, agate, etc. Bagor in Rajasthan is the type set of microlithic excavations. These microlithic tools are generally 1 to 5 centimeters long, and these types include smaller version of Upper Paleolithic types such as points, scrapers, burins, awls, etc. Besides some new tool types like lunettes, trapezoids, triangles, arrowheads of various shapes and sizes. Bhimbetka near Bhopal presents the art of painting practiced by Paleolithic and Mesolithic people. It contains more than 500 painted rock shelters distributed in an area of 10 square kilometers. The exact date of these paintings is not certain, but some of the paintings are as old as 12,000 years. The prehistoric artist used natural white and red pigments in depicting the various themes which were close to his heart and sustenance. Some of the most important and extensively studied sites of Mesolithic culture and Bagor in Rajasthan, Langnaj in Gujarat, Sarai Nahar Rai, Chopani Mando, Mahdaha and Dandama in Uttar Pradesh, and Bhimbetka and Adangar in Madhya Pradesh. We got the evidence of the association of sheep and goat with Mesolithic people from Bagor and Adamgar around 6 million BC. This suggests that they may have partly adopted the settled way of life. We come to know that these communities were essentially hunters, food gatherers, and fishermen, but also practiced some form of agriculture. Neolithic Age. Approximately 10,000 years ago, at the end of the Pleistocene Age, climatic conditions more or less similar to these of today were established in Western and Southern Asia. The most fundamental advance that has affected the course of human life was the domestication of a large number of animals and plants. The present evidence suggests that the West Asia, wheat and barley were domesticated by 7000 BC. The Neolithic Age or the New Stone Age was the last phase of the Stone Age and he characterized by very finely flaked small stone tools as known as blades and Neolithic Age began in 9000 BC. In the world context, the only Neolithic settlement in the Indian subcontinent attributed to 7000 BC lies in Meghar, which is situated in Baluchistan, a province of Pakistan. The archaeological sites of Kili Gul Muhammad, Gumla Rana Gundai, Anjira, Mundiga, and Meherga in the Kachi plain give evidence of a date between 7000 to 5000 BC. Of these, Megarha has been most extensively examined. The evidence shown that the habitation here began in about 7000 BC, but the early period no use of ceramic is seen. However, in about 1000 years' time, around 6000 BC, earthen pots and pans come in use, first handmade and then wheel-made. The beads found with burial remains show that people used beads made of lapis lazuli, carnelian, banded gate, and white marine shell. A single copper bead has also been found. The occurrence of shell bangles and pendants made of mother of pearl indicated long distance trade. Some of the most important Neolithic sites are Gufkaral and Burjahom in Kashmir, Meghara, Chakpani Mando and Kaldiva in Balam Valley in Uttar Pradesh, and Chirand in Bihar. Besides rice, evidence for barley cultivation is attested in Maghara. They built houses of wattle and down with rammed floor, 10 cow, bull, goat, sheep, and cultivated horse, gram, millet, and ragi. The early Neolithic settles in the northwest in Burjahom lived in pit dwell rather than buildings, houses, or the ground settlement at the Chirand in Bihar is relatively late. The Neolithic Age also saw the domestication of cattle, horses, and other farm animals, which were used of dairy and meat products. An important invention of this time was the making of the wheel. The people of Gufkaral, a Neolithic site 41 kilometers southwest of Srinagar, practiced both agricultural and domestication of animals. It is interesting that the Burjahom domestic dog and were buried with their masters in their graves. The placing of domestic dogs in the graves of the masters do not seem to be the practice with Neolithic people in any other part of India. We have the most decisive evidence of new patterns of subsistences in South India, almost contemporary with the Harappan culture. Some of the most important sites in southern India are Kodakal, Utnur and Andhra Pradesh, Tekkakolta, Maski, T. Narsipur, Sangankullu, Hallur and Brahmagiri in Karnataka, and Payimpalli in Tamil Nadu. Prehistoric rock art. Some of the important rock painting sites are Murhana Pahar in Uttar Pradesh, Bimbetka, Adangar, Lakkajaur in Madhya Pradesh, and Kupagallu in Karnataka. The colors used in making these drawings are deep red, green, white, and yellow. The distribution of these rock paintings is very wide. They have been found in Chargul in northwest Pakistan to Orissa in the east, and from the Koman Hills is in the north to Kerala in the south. Depiction of human figures in rock painting is quite common. The humans are shown in various activities such as dancing, running, hunting, playing games, and engaged in battle. Animals are the most frequently depicted subjects, either alone or in large and small groups and shown in various poses. There are also some hunting scenes of which the rhinoceros hunt from the Adangar group of rock shelters is indicative of the joining of large number of people for the hunt of bigger animals. Chalcolithic farming cultures of Indian subcontinent. The Neolithic age quickly gave way to a number of small cultures that were highly technical. These people used copper and bronze to make a range of utilitarian tools. This phase or period is termed as the Chalcolithic age, 1800 BC to 1000 BC. The Chalcolithic cultures flourished during the 3rd millennium and 2nd millennium BC. End of Neolithic period saw the use of metals. First metal to be used was copper, and culture based on the use of stone and copper implements was called Chalcolithic. For example, copper stone. Some cultures determined by their uses of potteries or ware as follows. NBPW. The northern black polished were characteristics of the urban centers of the Ganga plain. Is throughout the have developed from high temperature firing techniques used in smelting iron and from the use of local hematite soil. Its extensive distribution as the luxury ware helps the tracking of exchange and trade in various parts of the subcontinent. OCP. The period covered by the ochre-colored pottery culture may roughly be placed between 2000 and 1500 BC. On the basis of a series of 8 scientific datings, in the upper portion of the Doab settlement begins with the advent of the orange-colored pottery people. PZW. The painted grey ware culture, of which some sites are located in Hakra Plain in a post-Harappan context, was predominant in the western Ganga plains in the 1st millennium BC. Spreading from the Indo-Gangetic watershed to the confluence of the Ganga and Yamuna. Important settlements of the PZW include Ropar, Punjab, Bhagwanpur, Haryana, and Atranji, Kheda, Hastinapur, Achintra, and Jakera in Uttar Pradesh. They all are characterized by painted ceramic, usually black on red, a specialized blade and flake, chalk, doni, and chet, and copper and bronze tools, though on a restricted scale. Their economy was based on subsistence agriculture, stock raising, and hunting and fishing. Some important Chalcolithic cultures are Malwa culture, 1900 to 1400 BC, Ahar culture, 2800 to 1500 BC, Kaita culture, 2450 to 1700 BC, Jorwe culture 1500 to 1900 BC. Svalda culture 2300 to 2000 BC. Prabhas culture 2000 to 1400 BC. Rangpur culture 1700 to 1400 BC. The Kaita culture is characterized by a sturdy red slipper were painted with design in chocolate color, a red painted buff were and a combed were bearing incised patterns. The Afar people made distinctive black and red were decorated with white slate design. The settlement of Kaita culture are only a few in numbers, mostly located on the Chambal and its tributaries. They are relatively small in size and the biggest may be not over 2 hectares. Settlement those of Ahar culture are big in contrast to small Kaita culture. The Malwa ware is rather coarse in fabric but has a thick buff surface over which designs are made either in red or black. The Malwa were typical of the Malwa Chalcolith culture of central and western India is considered the richest among the Chalcolithic ceramics. Some of its pottery and other cultural elements are also found in Maharashtra. Navdatoli, Iran and Nagada are the three best known settlements of Malwa culture. It has been seen that some of these sites were fortified and Nagada had been a basin of mud bricks. Iran similarly had a fortification wall with a moat. The Prabhas and Ragpur wares are both derived from the Harappan, but have a glossy surface due to which they are also called lustrous redware. The Rangpur culture sites are located mostly on Gilio and Kalubar rivers in Gujarat. The Jarvi settlements are comparatively larger in number. More than 200 settlements are known as from Maharashtra. Prakash, Diamabad and Inamagran are some of the known settlements of this culture. The largest of these is Diamabad, which measured almost 20 hectares. Chronologically, there are several series of Chalcolithic settlements in India. Some are pre-Harappan, others are contemporaries of the Harappan culture, and still others are post-Harappan. Pre-Harappan strata on some sites in the Harappan zone are also called early Harappan in order to distinguish them from the mature urban Indus civilization. Thus, the Harappan phase at Kalibangan in Rajasthan and Banwali in Haryana is distinctly Chalcolithic. So is the case with Kot Diji in Sindh in Pakistan. Excavation revealed that Baltal was a well-fortified settlement. The Chalcolithic people built rectangular and circular houses of mud, wattle, and dough. The circular houses were mostly in clusters. These houses and huts had roofs of straw supported on bamboo and wooden rafters. People raised cattle as well as cultivated both kharif and rabi crops in rotation. Wheat and barley were grown in the area of Malwa. Rice is reported to have been found from Inamagan and Ahar. These people also cultivated jowar and bajra and also kut, ragi, green peas, lentil and green and black grams. Religious beliefs. The worship of Mother Goddess and the bull was in vogue. The Mother Goddess is depicted on a huge storage jar of Malwa culture in an applique design. She is flanked by a woman oil the right and crocodile on the left, by the side of which is represented the shrine. The bull cult seems to have been predominant in Malwa during the Ahar period. The large number of naturalistic as well as stylized lingas have been found from most of the sites. Likewise, the fiddle-shaped figurines probably resembling Srivatsa, the symbol of Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth in historical period, represent a mother goddess. Two figurines from Inamagan belonging the late Jar culture have been identified as Proto-Ganesh, who is worshipped for success before embarking on an undertaking. Trade and commerce. Chalcolithic communities traded and exchanged materials with other contemporary communities. Wheeled bullock carts, drawing of which have been found on pots, were used for long-distance trade, besides the river transport. It appears that Ahar people settled close to the copper source, supplied copper tools and objects to other contemporary communities in Malwa and Gujarat. It has been suggested that most of the copper axes found in Malwa, Jar and Prabhas cultures bear some identification marks, which are almost identical suggestions that they may be the trademarks of the smiths who made them. Gold and ivory may have come from Tekkalkotta, Karnataka, to Jar people who is in turn traded these to their contemporaries. Similarly, couch shell for bangles were traded from the Saurashtra coast to various other parts of the Chalcolithic regions. The semi-precious stones may have been traded to various parts of Rajapal, Gujarat. It is interesting to note that the Jar people traded even the pottery to distant places, as Inamagan pottery has been found at several sites located away from it. Technology. The Chalcolithic farmers had made considerable progress in ceramic as well as metal technology. The painted pottery was well made and well fired in kiln. It was fired at a temperature between 500 to 700 centigrades. We find axes, chisels, bangles, beads, hooks, etc., which were mostly made of copper in metal tools. The copper was obtained perhaps from the Khetri mines of Rajasthan. Lime was prepared out of conker and used for various purposes like painting houses and lining the strongest bins, etc. The find of crucibles and pairs of tongues of copper at Inamagan shows the working of goldsmith. Copper hod culture. Since the first reported discovery of a copper harpoon from Bitur in Kanpur district in 1822, nearly 1,000 copper objects have been found from almost 90 locations in various parts of India. The largest hoard from Gungaria, Madhya Pradesh, comprises 44 pieces of copper objects and 1 or 2 thin sheets of silver. The main type of objects are various kind of shells, harpoons, antennae, swords, rings, and anthropomorphs. The source of metal for these copper hoards appear to be the Khetri copper mines as well as hilly region of Almora district in Uttarakhand. The copper hoards includes weapons and tools as well as objects of worship. The harpoons and antennae swords are likely to have been used as weapons, while various kinds of shells and axes may have been used as tools. Bar shells appear to have been used for mining ores. Chapter 2. Harappa Civilization. Harappa was the first site to be discovered by Alexander Cunningham in as early as 1875. He was the first Director General of the Archaeological Survey of India, ASI, often called the father of Indian archaeology. Harappan site was badly destroyed by brick robber. The Harappan civilization was discovered in 1920-21, following the excavation by R.D. Banerjee at Mohenjo-daro and by D.R. Sunny at Harappa. Primarily, this civilization was named after Harappa, the first site where the unique culture was discovered, but later termed as the Indus Valley Civilization due to the discovery of more and more sites in the Indus Valley. Alternatively, it has also come to be called the Harappan Civilization, after the name of its first discovered site, because more and more sites were discovered far away from the actual river valley. On the basis of finding of Harappan seals in Ur and Kish in Mesopotamia, Marshall suggested that Harappan civilization flourished between 3250 and 2750 BC. Wheeler dated it to 2500 to 1500 BC, but according to C, 14th system mature Harappan civilization was prevalent during 2350 to 1750 BC. The cities were far more advanced than their contemporaries in prehistoric Egypt, Mesopotamia, or anywhere else in Western Asia. There were earlier and later cultures, often called Early Harappan and Late Harappan, in the same area. The Harappan civilization is sometimes called the mature Harappan culture to distinguish it from these cultures. On the basis of radiocarbon dating of this civilization, following chronology emerges. Early Harappan phase 3500 to 2600 BC. Mature Harappan phase 2600 to 1900 BC. Late Harappan phase 1900 to 1300 BC. Those cultures which precede Harappan culture are pre-Harappan cultures, while proto-Harappan cultures are those pro-Harappan cultures, which have some close similarities with the Harappan culture, or which may be said to have anticipated certain essential elements of Harappan culture. There is every chance that it was in Gagar-Hakra system in Kholistan the transition from early Harappan culture to mature Harappan civilization was achieved. Early Harappan settlements were located in Kirtar, Piedmont and Khohistan. It is only during mature Harappan civilized phase that we find settlements, one of which was Mohenjo-daro in floodplain area. Harappan civilization covers an area of 12,50,000 square kilometers. Most of these sites are located on river banks. Distribution pattern of these settlements in terms of rivers are that first one. Only 40 settlements are located on the Indus and its tributaries. Second one. As many as 1100 settlements are located on the vast plain between the Indus and the Ganga, comprising mainly the Saraswati river system, which is dry today. Third one, about 250 settlements are found in India beyond the Saraswati river system, a number of them in Gujarat and a few in Maharashtra. Its known extent in the west is up to Sutkajandar in Balochistan, Alangipur in Uttar Pradesh in the east, Dayamabad in Maharashtra in south, and Manda in Jammu Kashmir in the north. It covers an area of almost 1600 km east-west and 1400 km in north-south. Town planning. Harappan civilization's town planning was very well planned. If you look at the plan of the lower town, you will notice that roads and streets were laid out along an approximate grid pattern intersective at right angles. The towns were well planned and the streets cut each other at the right angles. Even the width of these streets were in a right ratio. Lanes were considerably narrower. Inner lanes seldom ran straight but often twisted and turned. One of the most distinctive features of Harappan cities was the carefully planned drainage system. It seems that streets with drains were laid one out and then houses built along them. If domestic waste water had the flow into the street drains, every house needed to have at least one wall along street. Small drains made of burnt bricks were connected with bathing platforms, and latrines of private houses joined the medium-sized drains in the side streets. These drains ran into larger sewers in the main street, which were covered with bricks or dressed stone blocks. Corbelled arch drains have also been found. One of them is at least 6 feet deep, which functioned as main drain, taking all the wastewater out of the town. Most distinctive feature is number of burnt brick drain at Mohenjo-daro and Lothal. There are drains in all larger streets and smaller lanes also. There is no system of street drainage at Kalimbangam. The average size of brick used for houses was 7 into 15 into 30 centimeters. But for the construction of fortification walls, the size of brick was Bayer size 10 into 20 into 40 centimeters. Both sizes of bricks have identical proportions 1 is to 2 is to 4. That the width is the thickness and the length 4 times the thickness. Doorways and windows rarely opened out into the main street, but faced side lanes. Some houses have remains the staircases to reach a second story on the roof, often in a room that could be reached from the outside and perhaps used by passers. Almost every house had a bathroom, and in the same case there is evidence of bathrooms on the first floor. Earlier it was thought that all cities were having the standard division into high in western Occidental and a lower town in the east, reflecting the division of cities into rulers and the service communities, with the crafts workshop located on the lower city. But this interpretation is not correct, because large public buildings, market areas, large and small private houses, as well as crafts workshops have been found in all areas. While most Harappan settlements have a small high western part and a larger lower eastern section, there are verifications at sites such as Dolvaria and Lothal, Gujarat. The entire settlement was fortified, and the section within the town were also separated by walls. The citadel within Lothal was not walled off, but was built at a height. Perhaps the most remarkable features of the citadel mount of Mohenjo-daro is the Great Bath. This finely built brick structure measures 12 meters by 7 meters and is nearly 3 meters deep from the surrounding pavement. It is approached at either end the flights of steps. The floor of the bath was constructed of sawn bricks and engined between the inner and outer brick layers. Immediately to the west of the Great Bath at Mohenjo-daro is a group of 27 blocks of bricks work crisscrossed by narrow lanes. Overall, it measures 50 meters east-west and 27 meters north-south. Somewhat similar structures have been found in Harappa, Kalimbangan, and Lothal. These structures have been identified as granaries, which were used for strong grains. An important structure is the dockyard found at Lothal. It is the large structure measuring 223 meters in length, 35 meters in width, and 8 meters in depth, provided with an inlet channel in the eastern wall and a spillway. The inlet channel was connected to the river. By its side is a 250 meters long and 20.6 wide wharf. Social and political system. The Harappan society seems to have been divided into 3 sections, with an elite class associated with the citadel, a well-to-do middle class, and a relatively weaker section occupying the lower down to which were generally fortified. Whether these divisions were based purely on economic factors or had a socio-religious basis, it cannot be defined. Some visualized transformation of petty chiefdoms into organized states. The lower town was also walled. Several buildings were built on platforms, which served as foundations. It has been calculated that if one laborer moved roughly a cubic meter of earth daily, just to put the foundation in place, it would have required 4 million persons. In other words, mobilizing labor on a very large scale. At Kalimbangan, it appears that the priest resided in the upper part of the citadel and performed rituals on fire altars in the lower part of it. Religion. It can be said from the available evidence that the religion of the Hindus people comprised: first one, the worship of the mother goddess; second one, the worship of male deity, probably the of Shiva; third one, worship of animals, natural semi-human; fourth one, worship of trees in their natural state of their indwelling in spirit; worship of inanimate stones or other objects of linga and yoni symbols; sixth one, Chromatism as illustrated in the worship of the sacred incense burners; seventh one, faith and amulets and charms indicative of deminophobia; eighth one, practice of yoga. These were regarded as mother goddess, rare stones statuary of men in an almost standardized posture, seated with one hand on the knee, such as the priest king, was also similarly clarified. In other instances, structures having been assigned ritual significance. These includes the great bath and fire altars found at Kalimbangan and Lothal. A male deity, the top of the historic Shiva, is portrayed on a seal with three faces, seated on low throne in the typical posture of yogi, with two animals on each side, elephant and tiger on right and rhinoceros and buffalo on left, and two deer standing under the throne. The depiction shows Shiva as Pasupati. Some animals, such as one horned animal, often called the unicorn, depicted on seals, seems to be mythical, composite creatures. In some seals, a figure shows seated cross-legged in yogic posture. Sometimes surrounded by animals, has been regarded as a depiction of Proto-Shiva, that is, an early form of one of the major deities in Hinduism based on conical stone objects have been clarified as lingas. There is sufficient evidence of the prevalence of phallic worship. Numerous stone symbols of female sex organs, yoni worship, besides those of the phallus, have been discovered. The worship of fire is provided by the discovery of altars in Lothal, Kalibangan and Harappa. At Kalibangan, Lothal and Banwali, a number of fire altars have been found which seem to have been used as sacrificial altars. Further, they believed in ghosts and evil forces and used amulets as protection against them. Trade and commerce. Inter-religious trade was carried on with Rajasthan, Saurashtra and Maharashtra, South India, parts of western Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Foreign trade was conducted mainly with Mesopotamia and Bahrain. Trade was carried by the overlands as well as over cases transport. Bullock carts and pack oxen were employed for land transport. Agricultural produce, industrial raw material like copper, ore, stone, semi-precious cells, etc. were traded beside the raw material. Finished products of metals like pots, pans, weapons, etc. Precious and semi-precious stones like beads, pendants, beads, amuls, etc. Ornaments of gold and silver were also traded to various areas. In Indus, area seals of Mesopotamia, Iran and Central Asia occur to Mohenjo-daro and Kalibangan. Gulf semi also found in Bet Dwaraka. Whole region was tied by a network of overland and maritime trade. The term Meluha in Mesopotamia literature may not denote exclusively area of Indus but whole area to east of Khuzestan and Iran and included Indus area. There is evidence of sea and river transport by ships and boats in several seals and terracotta models apparently from the dockyard at Lothal. The Sumerian texts refer trade relations with Meluha, which was the ancient name given to Indian religion, and they also speak of two intermediate stations called Dilmun. The occurrence of mature Harappan seals and other artifacts in contemporary Mesopotamia civilization, and some of the Mesopotamian and Egyptian objects are Harappa civilization, and the evidence of Mesopotamian documents established that the Harappan had trading relationship with the land. The weight proceeded in a region series, first doubling from the 248 to 64, then going to 160, and from the 1 is decimal multiples of 16, 320, 640, 1600, 6400, 1600 into 4, 8000, 1600 into 5, and 128 lakhs, 16,000 into 8. Some are suggestive of Mesopotamian mythology like Gilgamesh. Source of materials. Material: gold. Source: Afghanistan, Persia, Karnataka. Silver: Afghanistan, Iran. Copper: Baluchistan and Khetri in Rajasthan. Tin: Afghanistan, Central Asia. Agates: Western India. Chalcodony, Saurashtra. Lead: Rajasthan, South India, Afghanistan, Iran. Lapis lazuli, Afghanistan. Turquoise, Central Asia, Iran. Amethyst, Maharashtra. Jade, Central Asia. Carnelian, Saurashtra. Transport and travel. A terracotta model of a ship or a boat with stick impressed socket for the mast and eye holes for fixing oars has been found from Lothal. The boats depicted on seals and pottery resemble that ones used today in Sindh and Punjab areas. The terracotta models of bullock cart and cart tracks found on road from various sites indicate that carts used in those days were in size and shape practically like the present day's ones. Craft production industries and technology. Basic tool types were made by simple casting. Bronze is present from the lowest levels but is more common in upper levels. Although the Harappan civilization is referred to as a Bronze Age civilization, mostly alloyed copper was used for manufacturing artifacts and only rarely tin was alloyed in copper to make bronze. Objects of gold are reasonably common. Silver makes an earliest appearance in India. It is more common than gold. Lead was imported and occasionally used. People also made copper and bronze vessels. They made small plates and weight of lead and gold and silver jewelry of considerably sophistication. The variety of materials used to make beads is remarkable. Stone like carnelian of a beautiful red color, jasper, crystal, quartz and statite. Metals like copper, bronze and gold, and statite metals like copper, bronze and gold, and shell, Phasians and terracotta or burnt clay. Some beads were made of two or more stones cemented together, some of the stone with gold caps. The shape were numerous: disc-shaped, cylindrical, spherical, barrel-shaped, segmented. Some were decorated by incising or painting, and some had designs etched into them. Statite was used for making a variety of objects like seals, beads, bracelets, buttons, vessels, etc. But its use in making faience, a form of glass, is particularly noteworthy. In this material, beads, amuls, sealings, and even animal models have been found. They established settlements such as Nageshwar, and Balakot in areas where shell was available. Other such sites of Shortgai in far off Afghanistan near the best source of lapis lazuli, a blue stone that was apparently very highly valued, and Lothal, which is a near source of carnelian from Baruchi and Gujarat, statite from South Rajasthan and North Gujarat, and metal from Rajasthan. The pottery technology was quite advanced. Most of the pots were wheel made. Pots were beautifully painted in black on the bright red surface with geometric designs, animals, and a few paintings seems to depict scenes from stories. Harappan pottery is bright or dark red and is uniformly sturdy and well banked. It is chiefly made with mud and consists of both plain and painted ware, the plain variety being more common. Harappan people used different types of pottery such as glazed, pyrochrome, inside, performed, and knobbed. The glazed Harappan pottery is the earliest example of its kind in the ancient world. On the whole, Harappan pottery was highly utilitarian in character, though the painted designs on some pieces shows a remarkable artistic touch. More than 2,500 seals have been found. These are made of statite. They mostly depict a single animal, unicorn, bull, elephant, rhinoceros, etc. But some also depict trees, semi-human and human figures. In some cases, participating is a ceremony. Shell working was another flourishing industry. Arts. The most outstanding pieces are a yogi from Mohenjo-daro and two small figurines from Harappa. They are the greatest artistic creations of the Indus people, most commonly made of soft stone. The technique of cutting and polishing these seals with white luster was a unique invention of a Harappans. The majority of the seals have an animal engraved on them with a short inscription. Unicorn is the animal most frequently represented on the seals. The most largest number of seals depict unicorn, but the most artistic depictions are the figures of humped bull. Other animals are elephants, tigers, rhinoceros, ram, etc. Bronze are rare. Among bronze sculptures, best specimen is nude dancing girl statue of about 11.5 centimeters in height, identified as dancing girl from Mohenjo-daro. Significantly, this has been made by the lost wax method of casting. Diamabad bronze animals workmanship most probably being to Harappan period. The red sandstone torso found in Harappa is made of detachable limbs and head, and the grey stone torso perhaps shown as dancing figure. Most Harappan sites are located in semi-arid lands, where irrigation was probably required for agriculture. Traces of canals have been found at the Harappan site of Shortgai in Afghanistan, but not in Punjab or Sindh. It is possible that ancient canals lighted up long ago. It is also likely that water drawn from wells was used for irrigation. Besides, water reservoirs found in Dholalvira in Gujarat may have been used to store water for agriculture. The principal cereals seems to have been wheat and barley. Rice, though known, was a favored grain. 6 varieties of millets, and including ragi, kondan, sanva, and jowar, were cultivated, as also peas and beans. Remains of rice have been found mainly from Gujarat and Haryana areas. Other crops include dated varieties of legumes, sesame, and mustard. Fragments of cotton cloth found at Mohenjo-daro and other sites shows that the cotton was also grown. Cotton has been found at Mehrgarh at least 2000 years before the mature phase of the civilization. This is the oldest evidence of cotton in the world. The cultivated field excavated at Kalingaran, Rajasthan, Chrysosis furrow marks indicating that two crops were grown simultaneously. For tilling fields, wooden plug with a copper or wooden plowshare was used. Terracotta models of a plough have been found at Mohenjo-daro and Banawali. Script and language. Harappan script is regarded as pictographic since its sign represents birds, fish, and a variety of human forms. The script was upstrophendon, written from right to left. When the inscription was of more than one line, it could be first line from right to left and second from left to right. The number of signs of the Harappan script is known as to be between 400 and 600, of which about 40 or 60 are basic. Most inscriptions are short, the longest containing about 26 signs. Although the script remains undeciphered to date, it was evidently not alphabetical, where each sign stands for a vowel or a consonant. As it has just too many signs, however, between 375 and 400. The language of the Harappans is still unknown. The must remains so until the Harappan script is deciphered. Number of the inscribed objects is around 3675. They consist of seals, copper tablets, implements, pottery, and other miscellaneous objects. About 50% of these objects are found at Mohenjo-daro. Evidence of domesticated and wild animals. Animal bones found at Harappan sites includes those of cattle, sheep, goat, buffalo, and pig. Studies done by archaeologists or zoologists indicate that these animals were domesticated. Bones of wild species such as boar, deer, and grackle are also found. We do not know whatever the Harappans hunted these animals themselves or obtained meat from other hunting communities. Bones of fish and fowl are also found. Bones of several animals have been found in excavations. Skeleton remains include sheep, goat, bull, buffalo, elephant, camel, pig, dog, and cat, which were all domesticated. Bones of wild animals like spotted deer, shambar deer, hog deer, wild pig, etc. are also found, which evidently were hunted for food. Several types of birds as well as fishes were also hunted for food. Bones of horses have been reported from Lothal, Sarkotada, Kalibangan, and several other sites. Terracotta figurines of the horse have been found at Nausharo and Lothal, but no unambiguous depiction of the animal on seals has so far been found. Burial practices. 3 forms of burials are found at Mohenjo-daro: viz. Complete burials, fractional burials, burial of some bones after the exposure of the body to wild beasts, birds, the post-cremation burials, but the general practice of extended inhumation, the body lying on its back, with the head generally to the north. Cremation was also practiced. At funerals in Harappan sites, the dead were generally laid in pits. Sometimes there were differences in the way the burial pit was made. In some instances, the flooded out spaces were lined with bricks. Could these variations be an indication of social differences? We are not sure. Some graves contain pottery and ornaments, perhaps indicating a belief those could be used in the afterlife. Jewelry has been found in burials of battle and women. Scattered burials as well as discrete cemeteries have been found at many major sites. The skeleton remains are few. Main regions: Sindh, Rajasthan, Haryana, and Punjab. Makran Coast, Baluchistan, Gujarat. Sindh, Mohenjo-daro enjoys an agricultural advantage but also served as the main mercantile center. Mohenjo-daro is 3 times larger than next larger settlement in Sindh, which is Naro-Varo-Daro. There are totally 174 mature Harappan sites, the largest site being Ganverwala. Areas exclusively earmarked for cleans and mass productions of items are recognized at 79 sites. Some of those were involved in copper smelting. Rajasthan, Haryana and Punjab. Report of 21 sites in an area of 50 by 25 kilometers. 5 of these sites are Dalevan, Gurnikalan, Hasanpur, Lakmirwala, Bagelian Date. They are massive settlements with 4 being in category of Harappa and 1 Lakmirwala being as large as Mohenjo-daro. Makram Coast. Sutka Gender, Sutka and Kairiakot are ports in maritime links with Gulf and Mesopotamia. Balakot in Las Bela may have a trading component too. Baluchistan. Darkot in north possesses a Harappan leaven. It may be a trading settlement. Gujarat. Discovery of Gulf seal at Lothal suggestive maritime contact with Gulf. There is clear evidence of centralized planning at all major exagated sites. Major sites. Harappa, the first Indus site to be discovered and exagated in 1921. The Indus civilization was originally called Harappan civilization after this site. The great granary measuring 169 feet into 3.5 feet is the largest and the most remarkable structure found at Harappa. 2 rows of 6 granaries are found here. These were the nearest buildings to the river. Rows of single-roomed barracks are found here, which considered to be houses of laborers. So far, 891 seals have been recovered from Harappa, and that is 40% of the total number of seals belonging to Indus Valley civilization that have been found. A red sandstone naked male torso has been found, which shows traces of ginseng. Between the granary and the citadel have also been found a series of circular platforms, probably for the prouting of grain. At a lower level below the granary, platforms and the citadel were crowded one-room dwelling which suggests slave habitats. Mohenjo-daro. In Sindhi language, the word Mohenjo-daro means mound of the dead. It is the largest of all Hindu sites. The Great Bath is the most important public place, measuring 39 feet into 23 feet into 8 feet, located at the center of the citadel. It is remarkable for beautiful brickwork. Its floor is made of burnt bricks set in gypsum and mortar. It must have served as a ritual bathing site. Remains have been found of a oblong multi-pillared assembly hall and a big rectangular building, which must be have served administrative purposes. Most of Mohenjo-daro houses are built of kiln-fired brick. The major streets are 33 feet wide and run north-south. Interesting subordinate ones running east-west at right angles. The evidence of Indian ships and a piece of woven cloth has been discovered from here. There is a large granary consisting of podium of square blocks of burnt bricks with a wooden superstructure. Parallel rows of 2-roomed cottages found. The workmen or poor sections of the society perhaps used these cottages. A bronze dancing girl, seated statue of a priest and a seal bearing Pushpavati have been found here. It is important to remember that Mohenjo-daro shows 9 levels of occupation towering over 300 feet above the present floodplain. Kalibangan. Kalibangan is one of two Indus cities which have both Proto-Harappan and Harappan cultural phases. Discovery of platforms with 5 altars from here, less developed compared to Mohenjo-daro. There is evidence of mud brick fortification. Pre-Harappan phase here shows that the field were ploughed unlike the Harappan period. Archaeologists have discovered 2 platforms with fire altars suggestions the practice of cult sacrifice. The existence of wheel conveyance is provided by a cartwheel having a single hub. Chanhudaro, only Hindu city without a citadel. Existence of pre-Harappans as well as Harappan culture phase. A small fort was discovered here, which was probably an ink pot. Excavations revealed that people of Chandura here expect craftsmen. Archaeologists have discovered here metal workers, shell ornament makers, and bead makers' shops. The city was twice destroyed by inundations. Here more extensive but indirect evidence of superimposition of a barbarian lifestyle is seen. Like Mohenjo-daro, it was also flooded more than once. Banwali. Like Kalibangan, Amri, Kodiji, and Harappa, Banwali also saw 2 cultural phases, pre-Harappan and Harappan. Human and animal figures, clay bangles, and statue of Mother Goddess found here. Here we find large quantity of barley, sesame, and mustard. Sarkotada. Excavation level a citadel and a lower town, both of which were fortified. It is the only Hindu site where the remains of a horse have actually been drowned. Must have been another port city. There is interesting evidence of Kalibangan where a field surface has marks of furrows. For tilling, a wooden plough was used. Banwali has yielded a complete model of a plough. Quad Digi. Pre-Harappan and Harappan phases found. According to excavation, the city was probably destroyed due to fire. Wheel-made painted pottery, traces of a defensive wall and wall-aligned streets, knowledge of metallurgy, artistic toys, etc. 5 figurines of Mother Goddess discovered. Proper. The excavations have yielded 5-fold sequence of culture. Harappan, PCW, MPB, Kushana, Gupta, and medieval. The evidence of burying a dog below the human burial is very interesting. One example of rectangular mud brick chamber was noticed. Dholavira is the latest and it one of the 2 largest Harappan settlements in India, the other being Rakhigarhi in Haryana. The other Harappan towns were divided into 2 parts, citadel and the lower town. But Dhalovira was divided into 3 principal divisions, 2 of which were strongly protected by rectangular fortifications. There are 2 inner enclosures, the first one hemmed in the citadel and the second one protected the middle town. The existence of the middle town apart from the lower town is the real exclusive features of the city. Lothal. Only Hindu site with an artificial brick dockyard, it must have served as the main seaport of the Hindus people. It was surrounded by a massive brick wall, probably the flood protection. Lothal has evidence for the earliest cultivation of rice. The only other Hindu site where rice husk has been found in Rangpur near Ahmedabad. Fire altars indicating the probable existence of a fire cult have been found. A doubtful terracotta figurine of horse is found here. Shortgai. Shortgai in Oxus Plain is small and isolated site. It was a Harappan trading colony. Decline. After 2000 BC, the Hindu culture slowly declined and gradually faded out. Some ascribe this to decreasing account of the increasing salinity caused by the expansion of the neighboring desert. Other attribute to make kind of depression in the land, which caused floods. Still other point out that the Aryanas destroyed it. According to some scholars, decline of trade, particularly oceanic trade with the Sumerians, must have contributed partly in the decline, even though there are various theories for the downfall of the civilization. The most accepted version is that the ecological destructions. John Marshall and many other scholars, on the basis of evidence available from the sites along the Indus River, felt that this civilization declined due to environmental degradation. Reference to the destruction of forts by Aryanas in the Rig Veda, discovery of human skeletons huddled together at Mohenjo-daro indicated that it was probably invaded by foreigners. Evidence of further strengthening of defense at Harappa. The cutting of forests for agriculture and timber for fuel and overexploitation of resources, etc., resulted in the land to become barren and in the sitting of rivers. The Harappan civilization was spread over a large area, and the cause of its decline in all the origins cannot be one and the same. Thus, available data suggests that instead of coming to an abrupt end, Hindu civilization merged into main flow of Indian culture development. Archaeological evidence shows that the decline was gradual and slow, which is witnessed over a period of almost 600 years from 1900 to 1300 BC. The Vedic civilization. The Vedas are neither any individual religious work nor a collection of definite number of books compiled at a particular time. The Vedic literature had grown in the course of many centuries and was handed down from generation to generation by word of mouth. It consists of three successive classes of literation. It is generally agreed that Aryas originally lived somewhere, its steppes stretching from southern Russia to central Russia. The consensus of opinion is that originally they lived somewhere in the east of Alps. On their way to India, Aryans first appeared in Iran and a little later than 1500 BC they appeared in India. Kassite inscription of about 1600 BC and Mitanni inscription of 1400 BC found in Iraq bear some Aryan names, which suggests that from Iran a branch of Aryans moved toward west. The Rig Veda has many things in common with the Avesta, the oldest text in Iran language. Rig Veda is the earliest specimen of any Indo-European language. According to Rig Veda, early Aryans first settled in the region called Sapta Sindhava, or the land of seven rivers, encompassing the present East Afghanistan, Punjab, and western UP. Early Aryans were semi-nomadic and kept large herds of cattle. Vedic culture is known largely from Vedic literature. Discovery of 700 PZW sites so far in Indo-Ganga divide. Upper Ganga Valley and Ganga-Yamuna Doab has provided archaeological materials to corroborate and verify literate data in Vedic literature. This period was marked by further expansion of the Aryans to part of eastern Rajasthan, eastern UP and northern Bihar. During the period represented by the later Smahita and Brahmanas, the settlement covered virtually the whole of North India. The center of civilization now shifted from Saraswati to Ganga. The Sapta Brahmana thrown light on the expression to the eastern genetic plains. It reports the foundation of a Salem called Vedagha by a prince Vedagha Madhava. Rivers mentioned in Rig Veda: old name, new name. Old name Gomati, Gomal. Krumu, Kurram. Kuba, Kubul. Suvastu, Swat. Sindhu, Indus. Drishadvati, Chitang. Saturdri, Satluj. Vipas, Bees. Purushmi, Ravi. Asikni, Chanab. Vitatsa, Jalum. The later Vedic texts mention more rivers such as Narmada, Gadik, Chambal, etc. With regards to the seas, the Saptata Brahmana mentioned the eastern and western seas. The text also have reference to the terrestrial divisions of India. The three later Vedas give three broad divisions of India: Aryavarta, Madhya Desha, and Dakshinapada. But Atreya Brahmana divided the whole country into five parts: eastern, western, northern, central, and southern. During the later Vedic age, and the Aryas thoroughly subjugated the fertile plains watered by Yamuna, Ganga, and Sandhindra. They crossed the Vindhyas and settled the Deccan to the north of Godavari. Origin of Aryans: Central Asia, Max Muller. Tibet, Dayananda Saraswati. German plain, Prof. Penka. Pamirs, Mayor. Turkestan, Hursfield. Bacteria, Jesse Rod. Steppes, Brandistan. Arctic region, V.G. Tilak. Central India, Rajbali Pandey. Kashmir, L.D. Kala. Septa Sindhu, A.C. Das. Time period. There were several developments in Indian part of the subcontinent during the long span of 1500 years following the end of Harappan civilization. This was also the period during which the Rig Veda was composed by people living along the Indus and its tributaries. Max Muller arbitrarily assigned 200 years to the development of each of the three stages of Vedic literature and thus came to the conclusion that Rig Veda must have been composed around 1200 to 1000 BC. When questioned and criticized by its contemporaries like W. D. Whitney for his totally arbitrary, unscientific, and unacademic method, Max Muller confessed that he was merely speculating the stated whether the Vedic hymns were composed 1000, 1500, or 2000 or 3000 BC. No power on earth will ever determine. There were several pre-existing traditions of the religions belief and practice, including the early Vedic tradition known from the Rig Veda. Complained between 1500 and 1000 BC, the Rig Veda consists of hymns in the praise of a variety of deities, especially Agni, Indra, and Soma. Many of these hymns were chanted when sacrifices were performed, where people prayed for cattle, sons, good health, long life, etc. Some of the Vedic gods, namely Indra, Varna, Mitra, and two Nasatyas, are mentioned in Bogus Koi of 1400 BC, prove that Rigveda must have come into existence much before that date. The Bogus Koi inscription records a letter treaty between Hittite and the Mitanni kings, and these gods are cited as witness to the treaty. Bal Gangadhar Tilak on an astronomical grounds dated Rigveda to 6000 BC. R.K. Mukherjee opined that on a modest computation we should come to 2500 BC as the time of Rigveda. Famous Sanskritist Veternatist felt that the Rigveda was probably composed in the 3rd millennium BC. Vedic literature. The word Veda is derived from the Sanskrit word Veda, meaning to know or knowledge per excellence. Vedic texts are divided between Shruti, based on hearing, which is distinct from Smriti, based on memory. 4 Vedas and their Samhitas, and Brahmanas, the Aryankas, and the Upanishads from a class of literature known as Shruti. Rigveda. It is divided into 10 books or mandalas. Books 2 or 7 are considered the oldest. Book 1, 8, and 10 seems to be later additions. A collection of 10,028 hymns of a number of priestly families, written between 700 to 1500 BC when Aryans were still in Punjab. Book 2 to 8 are earliest and are also called as family books. They are attributed to Grishtamsa, Vishwamitra, Vasudeva, A.M. Bharadwaj, Vashishta, Kanva, and Angiras. The ninth mandala is dedicated exclusively to Soma. The 10th mandala contains the famous Purushukta hymn that explains the origin of four Varnas. Mentioned in Rigveda. Word times mentioned. Om 10,028. Ashwa 3015. Jana 275. Gau 176. Vis 171. Brahmana 14. Kshatriya 9. Yamuna 3. Sudra 1. Vaishya 1. Rajya 1. Kulpa 1. Ganga 1. Samudra 1. Yajurveda. A ritualistic Veda. It is divided into Shukla Yajurveda and Krishna Yajurveda. Atharva Veda mentioned beliefs and practices of non-Aryans. In Atharva Veda, Subha and Samiti are described as uterine sisters, the two daughters of Prajapati. Written in prose, it deals with produce of performance of sacrifices and contains rituals as well as hymns. Samaveda. Samaveda derives its roots from Saman, which means a melody, a collection of melodies, a collection of 6,003 hymns, except 99, all others were derived from Rigveda. Atharva Veda, a collection of 711 hymns. It is divided into 20 kandas. It is the last Veda. Atharva Veda is a book of magical formula. It contains charms and spells to ward off evil and disease. Its content thrown light on the practices of non-Aryans. Chief priest. The chief priests who were engaged in performing the sacrifices were Hotri the invoker. He recited hymns for Rigveda. Atharvyu the executor. He recited hymn from Yajurveda. Udagatri the singer. He recited hymn from Samveda. Brahmana. Atharva Veda. Although the hymns are attributed to rishis, purists Hindus have always said stress upon their divine origin. Thus the Vedas are called Apaurisheya, while the rishis are known as inspired seers who received the mantras from the supreme deity. The Upanishads. The word Upanishad means be seated at feet of Guru to receive teaching. Upanishads constitute Vedanta, end of Vedas. Upanishads represent spiritual teaching and investigations which are a common reference point for all subsequent Indian philosophy. Upanishadic tradition has its root in mythological experience, but it seeks rational and intelligible expression and invites testing of its conclusions. The term Upanishada indicated knowledge acquired by sitting close to the teacher. They consisted of discussion on several problems such as the creating of the universe, of the nature of the God, the origin of mankind, etc. They are anti-ritualistic and define the doctrine of karma, Atman, and God. They are spiritual and philosophical in nature. They are called the Vedanta or the end of Vedas. They advocate Nana Marga and are anti-ritualistic in nature. There are 108 Upanishads. Generally, the period from 1800 to 1500 BC is known as the period of Upanishads. The Aitreya and Kaushitaki Upanishads belongs to Rigveda. Chandogya and Kena Upanishad belongs to Samaveda. Taittiriya, Katha and Svetavastra Upanishad belongs to the Krishna Yajurveda. Brihadaranyaka and Isa belongs to the Sukla Yajurveda. Prasna, Mundaka and Mundakya belongs to the Atharva Veda. Aranyakas. There were some sages dwelling in the forest who explained the Vedic scriptures to their pupils in the form of Aranyakas, and they came to be known as forest texts. They explain metaphysics and symbolism of sacrifice. They are the forest books and were taught in the forest due to their magical powers. They from the concluding part of Brahmanas. Brahmanas. The Brahmanas are the prose commentaries on various Vedic hymns. They explain the Vedas in an orthodox way. They explain the hidden meaning behind the rhymes. They are ritualistic by nature. They are expressive of cause hetu, etymology, and injunction. Vedangas. In order to understand the Vedic literature, it was necessary to learn Vedangas or the limbs of Vedas. There are treatises on science and arts. They are Shiksha, Kalpa, Vyakarana, Chand, Nirukta, Jyotisha. Yaska's Nirukta 5th century BC is the oldest Indian linguistic text. Panini wrote Astadhyayi 4th century BC on Vyakaran. Upavedas. There were 4 Upavedas. Ayurveda dealing with medicine. Dhanurveda dealing with the art of the warfare. Gandharva Veda dealing with music. Shilpa Veda dealing with art and literature. Epics. Mahabharata is older compared to Ramayana and possibly reflects the state affairs of from 10th century BC to 4th century AD. Originally, Mahabharata consisted of 18,800 verses and was called Jayasamhita. They were raised to 24,000 and came to be known as Bharata. The final completion brought the number of verses to 1 lakh and came to be known as Mahabharata. The Ramayana of Valmiki originally consisted of 6,000 verses who were raised in 12,000 and finally to 24,000. Composition of Ramayana started in 5th century BC. It passed through several stages and attained its present form as 12th century AD. Puranas. The strikingly varied nature of the contents of Puranas seems to be the result of diverse materials, tales, anecdotes, songs and ballads, traditional lore, etc. There include mythology, cosmogony, various legends, genealogical accounts, folk beliefs, law codes, and miscellaneous topics. The Puranic literature is thus a unique outcome of the ever-continuing synthesis of various socio-economic formations operative between the 5th century BC and the 12th century AD. Every edition in the Puranic literature brought in its train numerous new deities and the image of temples, pilgrimages and vows, etc. The change in the mode of worship, visual appeal of the deities as against the worship of ideas, the fact of idol worship being more satisfying than yajna and sacrifice, revolution to the violence and bloodshed involved in animal sacrifices, all these explain the socio-religious economic transform action taking place in the Aryan society. Sutras. These are the treatises dealing with Vedic rituals on the hand and with customary law on the other. They are written as laboriously compressed style, sometimes approaching the structure of algebraic formulas, unit eligible without the help of authoritative commentaries, with a view to conveying to the future generations the ancient and contemporary literature. The Aryan sages invented a special consist method called the Sutra style. Thus, the massive Vedic texts were considered into short test formula, which could be easily remembered and transmitted orally. From the father of the son, from Guru to Shishya, most of the Vedic literature was handed down orally in the manner. The Sutra literature is divided into 3 classes. Sutra dealing with large public sacrifices, Griha Sutras dealing with ritual connected with birth, naming, marriage, etc. Dharma Sutras explain the social and logical custom which later on become the basis of Manusmriti. The Srauta Sutra dealing with large public sacrifices. Dharmashastras. Dharmashastras are the later Vedic age or epic age treatises on ethical and social philosophy. They deal systematically with the proper conduct of life and describe social, ethical, and religious obligations. The Dharmashastras are, in fact, another name for Smritis, which are two law books written in the Skrota meter. The chief among them are the Manav Dharma Shastra, the Vishnu Dharma Shastra, the Yajnavalkya Smriti and the Narad Smriti, Manav Dharma Shastra or Manu Smriti, in which Manu Smriti is the oldest and the most famous. Its other Manu is supposed to be the first king and the first lawgiver. Later on, some minor Smritis and commentaries like the Mitakshara were compiled. These books are not merely accounted of civil and criminal laws of the time, but they also cover all aspects of the daily life of the individual. They throw considerable light on the social and political life of the age, caste system, ashramas of life, economic conditions, as also state of professions, arts and crafts, architecture, and the working of administration. Religion. Prayers and offering to gods in Vedic period were made for material gains, also for enlightenment and knowledge. It was known as henotheism or Kathnatheism, a belief in single gods, each in turn standing out as highest. There was a tendency towards both monotheism and monism. Divinities are 33 in number, divided into three groups, namely terrestrial, atmospheric or intermediate, and celestial. Rigvedic gods. The early Vedic religion was naturalistic. Evidently, there were neither temples nor idols. The mode of prayer was recitation of mantras. Sacrifice was offered for praja, pasu, and dana, and not for spiritual upliftment of Maitri, the sun god. Surya, similar to that of the Greek god Helios. Savitri, the famous Gayatri mantra, is addressed to Savitri. Pusan, his main function was that of guarding of roads, herdsmen, and cattle. Vishnu, a relatively minor god at that time. Indra. He was the Aryan warlord and also controlled the weather. Has been called Purandar or destroyer of forts. He was the proverbial rain god. Prajanya, responsible for causing rainfall. 250 hymns are attributed to India. He was associated with thunder and storm and bore the thunderbolt, with which he destroyed his. He was being addressed by various names: Ratesta, Jitendra, Somapa, Purandra, Britanha, and Meghayan. Varuna. He was the upholder of Rita or cosmic order, and whatever happened in the world was thought to be reflection of his desire. As an administrator of the cosmic law, he regulated all activities in the world. It is law who has spread on the earth and set on the sun motion. He is therefore called the world's son, and he is also recorded as the human majority. Agni. He was the intermediary between God and men. He consumed the sacrificial offerings and carrying them to God. About 200 hymns on the Rigveda are attributed to Agni. He dwelt in the heaven in the form of lightning. On earth he existed in many forms. Yama, a sort of Adam, the first man to die who became the guardian of the world of dead. Soma, the god of plants. An antioxidant drink was also named Soma. The Soma sacrifice was an important Vedic rituals. He is the special god of Brahmanas, who referred to him as their patron deity. Other gods: Vayu, wind of god; Dyavs, father of heaven; Aditi, mother of Saurya; Pusan, moral storm spirits; Gandharvas, divine musicians; Ashwins, healer disease and expect the surgical art; Ribus, gnomes, apsaras, minstrels of god, Rudra, an archer god who arose brought disease, female deities, Usha, goddess of dawn, Aditi, mother of gods, Prithvi, earth goddess, Aryani, forest goddess, Saraswati, the river deity. Later Vedic religion. Towards the end of the Vedic age, a section of society began to resent priestly domination. The Upanishads criticized the cult of rituals and sacrifices and laid stress on right belief and right knowledge. They emphasized that knowledge of self should be acquired and relation of Atman with Brahma should be properly understood. Deeds of one life affected the next. This gave the theory of karma. Later Vedic gods, India and Varuna lost their previous inheritance of the Prajapati attained the supreme position. Rudra and Vishnu became more important than before. Pushan became the god of Sudras. Brahman monopoly over divine knowledge was established. An elaborate system of yajnas developed. Among the important ones were Rajasurya, Ashmaveda, and Vajpaya. Important rituals. Rajasuya, the king's influence was strengthened by rituals. He performed this sacrifice, which was supposed to confer supreme power on him. Asmaveda. A king performed the Asmaveda, which meant unique questions control over the area in which the royal horse ran uninterrupted. The ceremony lasted for 3 days, at the end of which horse sacrifice was performed. Vajpaya. A king performed the Vajpaya or the chariot race, in which the royal chariot was made to win the race against his kinsmen. The ritual lasted for 17 days and was believed not only to restore the strength of the middle-aged king but also to elevate him from the position of Raja to that Samrat. Importance of cow. The term Agnaya or not to be killed has been used for cow. This indicated cow's economic importance. Primarily a military leader, the king fought for cows and not for territories. Guests were called Gogana, which indicates that beef was offered to him. The gift made to priests usually consists of cow and women slaves and never of land. The cow seems to be most imported from the wealth. Most wars were fought for cows. The term of war in the Rig Veda is Gavisti or search for cows. Duhitri is a word for daughter, which literally means one who milks cow. The state of the political setup. The Bharatas, who gave their name to the whole country as Bharatavarsha, are the most important people of the Rig Veda. They were settled in the region between the Saraswati and the Yamuna. The Battle of 10 Kings gives name of 10 kings who participated in a war against Sudas, who was Bharata king of Trisu's family. The 10 kings were of the states of Parus, Yadus, Truvas, Anus, and Dashus, along with 5 other aliens, Paktas, Balanas, Sibis, and Vishans. The battle was fought on the banks of Parushni Ravi, and the Sudas emerged victorious. There were also emerged in the concept of a king of kings in the later Vedic period. Expressions like Adiraj, Rajadiraj, Samrat, and Ekrat are used in most of the text. Though the monarchy established itself on firm foundations, it was not absolute for limited in several ways. During later Vedic period, within the framework of kingship, there were operating certain democratic elements. Those were the people's rights in choosing their king, the conditions imposed on king's rights and duties, the king's dependence on the council of his ministers and the assemblies of people, Sabha and Samiti as check upon king's absolutism. The earlier known as Jana like Bharatas, Punars, Trisus and Tarvunas of the Rigvedic period slowly were merging the other Janas in disappearing from the scene. Relatively minor janas of Rigveda terms like Purus became more powerful and began to play more dominant role. In the Upanishads, the Karu Panchanga religion is mentioned as the seat of culture and prosperity. The Panchala king Pravahana Jaivali is mentioned as daily attending the Panchala Parishad. The texts testify the three kingdoms of Koshala, Kasi and Videha as seats of Vedic culture. Megadha and Anga are also mentioned as distant lands in the Atharva Veda. The Rigvedic Kikats have been identified with Magadha, Matsya, Janapada also get mentioned. In South, Vidarbha is mentioned. Vidarbha means Maharashtra. Killing of cows, slaying of brahmanas, drinking of intoxicating liquor, treachery, etc. were punishable by death. Petty offences were left to village judges. The punishments for crime were rather severe. The laws was also very clear on the question of inheritance of property, ownership of land, etc. The father's property was to be inherited by sons alone. The daughters could inherit it only if she was the only child or there were no male issues. Administration. The political structure of Rigveda India may be traced in the following ascending order. The family was the smallest unit. It included all the living under the same roof. The village, an arrangement of several families, made up the grama like today, and its headman was called Gramini. The clan, the next large formation, was called the Vis, under the head called Vispati. The people larger than Vis was Jana. The king of also called the protector of Jana and people. The country above the Jana was Rashtra. The territory monarchy was the normal from the government, but an elected king also finds mention. We also hear of chiefs democratically elected by one assembly of people. In the later Vedic period, some more official came into existence due to economic changes, etc. Vagupta, Sanghitri, etc. In both periods, the king did not possess a standing army due to financial limitations. Administrative office. Purohita, chief priest. Senami, the leader of the army. Prajapati, officer who enjoyed authority over posture ground. Kulpas, heads of families led by Prajapati. Gramini, head of fitting order under Prajapati. The chief received from people voluntary offering called gift or tribute. The bail came to the king from his own people and also from defeated people. Theft, burglary, robbery, and cattle lifting were the principal crimes which were strongly dealt with the administration. Great prominence is given in the Rigveda to popular assemblies called Sabha and Samiti. Most probably the Samiti, which mainly dealt with policy decisions and political business, included common people, while the Sabha, less political in character, was a more select body of the elders or nobles. During the later Vedic age, popular assemblies lost much of their importance and royal power increased at their cost. In other words, chiefdom gave way to kingdom. Formation of larger kingdoms made the king more powerful. For all practical purposes, kingship became hereditary. The Vedanta completely disappeared. Sabha and Samiti continued to hold ground, but their character changed and they were no more representative of the will of the majority. Women were no longer permitted to attend the assemblies, which came to be dominated by nobles and brahmanas. Regions and kings. Eastern king, Samrat. Western king, Savrat. Northern king, Virat. Southern king, Bhoja. King of middle country, Raja. Social organization. Based on kingship, the early Arya society was essentially tribal and egalitarian. People owed their primary royalty to their tribe, which was called Jana. The family was essentially patriarchal and birth of son was decided. The family was a large unit indicated by a common word of son, grandson, nephew, and one word for parental and maternal grandfather. Rashtra, kingdom, had not come into existence. When the Aryans first came to India, there was no consciousness of caste, nor were the professions hereditary. The word Varna is used in the Rigveda with reference to only the Aryan or Dasya having respectively fair or dark complexion, but never with reference to the Brahmana or Rajanya Kshatriyas. Quadruple division of society made its formal appearance only at one place in the 10th mandala of Rigveda. The term Shudra is mentioned for the first time in the 10th mandala of Rigveda. In later Vedic period, Varnas came to birth-based rather than profession-based. The proliferance of professioning gave rise to jatis, but the jati system was not at a rigid as it became during the period of sutras. The position of fourth Varna, Shudra, was made merceable by depressing them right of performing sacrifices, learning the sacred text, and as even holding mandatory poetry. The most glaring evil of the Jati system, namely the concept of untouchability, had not yet reared its ugly head. There was instance of individuals such as Keshava, Vasta, and Satkama Jabala who were born in non-Brahman jatis but came to be known as great Brahmanas. The ashrama system had not developed fully till the later Vedic period. Ashramas. The ashrama system is found mentioned for the first time in the Atreya Brahmana and Chandogya Upanishad for the first time, and also belonged to the later Vedic period of regulating the life of the male members of the higher caste. Meant mainly for regulating the life of the male member of the higher caste, they consist of fourth stage. Brahmacharya. In this ashrama, after the investigator with the sacrificed thread, a person leads a celebrate life as a student at the home of his teacher. Grihastha. Having matured the Vedas of part of them, a person returns to his parental home, gets married, and becomes a householder. Grihastha has manifold duties broadly marked out as yajna, adhyayana, and dana, and has to release himself from three debts: debt to God and yajna to practice of offspring, and rishis by continuing learning and leading of religious life. Vanaprastha. When well advanced in middle age and a person has seen his grandchildren, he leaves home for the forest to become a hermit. As a hermit, he must not have any possessions, abstain from momentary trains, doing from village to village for the exclusive purpose of begging, wearing only loincloth or old rags duly washed to cover nakedness, not staying in the same village for the second night, and not destroying seeds for the purpose of food, but depending on cooked food if given as alms. Sannyas. In sannyas, by meditation and penance, one frees his soul from material things, leaving hermitage and become a homeless wanderer. Thus, earthly ties are broken. This fourth ashrama is the one who person abundance, truth and falsehood, pleasure and pain, the Vedas, this world and the next seeks only Atman. Full recognition of the south stage was done only in the post-Vedic period. Brahmanas. The growing cult of sacrifice enormously added to the power of Brahmanas, who performed various rituals and sacrifices for their clients. In the beginning, they were merely one of the 16 classes of priests, but later on the overshadowed others, Kshatriyas. They constituted the warrior class. Majority of the rules belonged to this class. Vaishyas. They were the agriculturists, cattle rearers, traders, artisans, and metal workers. which formed the bulk of population. In some texts, the Kshatriyas are represented as living as the tributes collection from the Vaishyas. Sudras. They were the lowest in social hierarchy and were meant to serve the upper three varnas. The upper three varnas were known as the Dvijas. The upper three varnas were entombed Upanyanas or inventions with the scared thread. Position of women. Women held a respectable position in society. They could attend tribal assemblies. They took part in sacrifices along with their husbands. There are no example of child marriage and the marriageable age for girls was 16 to 17 years. We also get evidence of widow remarriage and practice of niyoga, in which a childless widow would cohabit with her brother-in-law until the birth of a son. Monogamy was the established practice, however, polygamy and polyandry were also known. Monogamy, very common. Polygamy, having more than three, known as not common. Remarriage of widows was permitted. Child marriage was unknown. Symbolic self-immolation by widows was prevalent. Women were participating in religious ceremonies and tribal assemblies. There were no evidence of seclusion of women. In the later Vedic period, they lost political right of attending assemblies. There were also intents of child marriages. Types of marriage. Brahma, marriage of the duly dowered girl to a man of the same class. Daiva, the father gives a daughter to sacrificial priest as a part of his fee. Arsa, a token bride price of a cow and a bull is given in place of the dowry. Prajapatya, the father gives the girl without dowry and without demanding the bride price. Gandharva, marriage by the consent of two parties, love marriage. Asura, marriage in which the bride was bought from her father. It was looked down upon with his disfavor by all sacred texts, although the Shastra allows it without criticism. Rakshasa, marriage by capture, was practiced especially by warriors. Paisacha, marriage by seducting. Of these 8 forms, the first 4 were generally approved and were permissible and brahmanas. Daiva marriage was considered the ideal. The other forms were looked down upon the varying degrees of disfavor. Gandharva marriage, which often might amount to no more than a lesion, was surprisingly respected. A special from the Gandharva marriage was the Swayamvara. Gotra. The institution of Gotra appeared in the later Vedic age, literally meaning copan. Gotra signed decrees from the common ancestor. People began to the practice of exogamy. In words, marriage between persons belonging to the same Gotra was prohibited. Education. Education began with Upanarayana ceremony. Sometimes the girls were also initiated. The age of Upanarayana was 8 years of Brahmana, 11 for Kshatriya and 12 for Vaishya. After this ceremony, he came to know Dvija. The Upanishads belonged to highest level intellectual attainment was the outcome of intellectual pursuits of the time. The aim of the learning was failed retention of knowledge acquired. Progeny willed longevity and immortality. A typical example of these were the conference of the learned organized by King Janaka of Videda, which is participants in the conference of Yajanyakalka. The details of the conference and various topics discussed. There was a Brahmana of the Upanishad. Food habits. Milk and its products, curd, butter, and ghee formed an important part of the diet. These are also mention of grain cooked with milk. Kshirapak Annadanam. Bread chapati of wheat and barley was eaten mixed with ghee. Not only for fish, birds, wild animals like antelopes and buffalo, etc. eaten, but on ceremonial occasion in the meat of animals which sacrificed such as sheep, goat and buffalo, etc. was also eaten. The cow was already deemed Agnya, not to be killed. The Vedas prescribe a penalty of death of expulsion from the kingdom to those who kill or injure cows. Alcoholic drinks, sura and soma were also consumed, though their consumption has been condemned because of its intoxicating effect, which something gave rise to broil in the Sabha. Economic life. The economic life of the Rigvedic people centered around agriculture, cattle rearing, and trade and commerce. Oxen were used for fluffing and drawing carts, and horses for drawing the chariots. The Rigveda attached great importance to agriculture. The plough was drawn by the oxen at times in times of 6, 8, or even 12. In the early Vedic period, the Aryans were still depending mainly on a pastoral economy. Their main occupation was cattle breeding. Animals they domesticated are cattle, horse, sheep, goat, dog, ass, etc. Wild animals known as lion, elephant, bear, etc. Tiger was not known. From various references in the Rig Veda, it appears that irrigation was also practiced. Excess of rains and drought is mentioned as damaging the crops. The grains are collectively called Yava and Dhanya. The later Vedic text mentioned 10 cultivated kings of the grains. Among the other occupations, pottery making, weaving, carpentry, metalworking, leather working, etc. are most noteworthy. Barter was in vogue. It has been found that 10 cows were quoted as the price for an image of Indra. The consumption of money can be traced in the mention of a gift of 100 nishkas. Money lending was also known. There is a mention of an 8th or a 16th part of one being paid either as an interest or part of the principal. However, the growth of economic prosperity is indicated in many prayers contained in the part of the principal. However, the growth of economic prosperity is indicated in many prayers contained in the Atharva Veda for the success of farmers, shepherds, merchants, and so on. The plough was known as Sira and the furrow Sita. Cow dung was used as manure. There is mention of 6, 8, and even 24 oxen yoked to a plough. Many kinds of grains were grown such as rice, barley, beans, and sesame. Their seasons are also mentioned. Barley sown in winter, ripened in summer, rice sown in the rains, reaped in autumn. The Satapada Brahmana enumerates various operations of agriculture such as ploughing, reaping, and threshing. Money lending was in vogue. Specific weight and measure units were also known. Niska and Satamana were the units of currency. There is no evidence of the use of coins with specific weight, size, and device during the under discussion. Bali, which was earlier only a voluntary gift to chief, had now become a regular tax and was collected to maintain the political and administrative structure. Merchants, long-distance caravans, and sea trade are mentioned. Guilds of craftsmen also came into existence. The word Sreshti, head of guild, final mentioned in several texts. During the Rigvedic period, only copper was used, for which the general term ayas has been used. In a later period, when iron came into use, copper and iron came to be known as Lohit iron and Cyan iron respectively. While in the later Vedic period, the copper was used for making vessels, silver and gold were used for making ornament, dishes, etc. Metal nodes: gold, Haryana, iron, Shyama, copper, Ayas. Pottery. Various types of pottery known. Black and red ware, black slipped ware, plain grey ware, red ware. Red ware was most popular. However, the most distinctive type of pottery was painted grey ware. Science and technology. Mathematics has been called by the general name Ganita, which includes arithmetic, Anka Ganita, geometric, Rekha Ganita, algebra, Bijiganita, astronomy and astrology, Jyotishya. Vedic people know the mention of making squares equal in area to triangle, circle, and calculate the sums of and differences of squares. The zero was known in Rigvedic times itself, and due to this, large number could also be recorded. Cubes, cube roots, square roots, and under roots were also known or used. In the Vedic period, astronomy was well developed. They also know that the earth moved on its own axis, and around the sun, the moon moved around the earth. Indian philosophy. Indian philosophy originated in the speculation of Vedic sages and reached its zenith in the Advaita Vedanta of Shankara. In Indian philosophy, there seems to be a general argument among all the following: the ultimate, enduring, and unitary reality in the individual as Atman. The pure Atman and Brahma are one. An individual would be right in saying, I am Brahma. To realize the Atman, one has to give up all desires for worldly and finite objectives, purify one's intellect, and live a righteous life. The ultimate reality in and beyond the objective world is called Brahma. It is from Brahma that the entire world originates. It is in Brahma that is exists, and it is in Brahma that is merges. Brahma is real, infinite, and blissful consciousness. The Bhagavad Gita says one should remain balanced both in happiness and sorrow, in profit and loss, and in victory and defeat. It tells that Atman is indestructible. Neither weapons can pierce it nor fire can burn it. Death is always that of body and not of Atman, which takes another body as its abode. The God incarnates himself with a view to punish the wicked and protect the God people. One can attain moksha in three ways: by acquiring highest knowledge, by devotion to God, and by action, selfless performance of one's duties without caring for reward. According to the doctrine of karma, one's present birth and condition is determined by the karma of his previous birth. Most thinkers have said that by our foresightness and righteous deeds in the present life, we can change these conditions. 6 systems of philosophy. Vaisesika by Kannada. The Vaisesika recognizes the Vedas as the final authority in gaining true knowledge about man and the universe. It tries to distinguish between the various kinds of ultimate things and to classify all the objects under 5 elements: earth, water, air, fire, and ether, existing in the form of atom, time, space, mind, and self. The creation of the world begins when the atom of these 5 elements start to combine, and when they disintegrate, the world comes to an end. Jnana by Gautam. The Nyaya system accepted all the categories recognized by the Vaisesika system and add one abhava, negation. Nyaya makes a detailed study of the source of knowledge, pramana. According to Nyaya school, there are 4 paramans, namely perception, pratyaksha, inference, anumana, comparison, upamana, and verbal testimony. Words, sabda. Sankhya by Kapil. The Samkhya is the oldest of all the 6 systems of philosophy. It teaches the existence of 25 basic principles. Of these 25 tattvas, first is Prakriti, matter. The Samkhya system believes that the evolution of universe is not due to God but due to the inherent nature of the Prakriti. A very important feature of Samkhya is the doctrine of 3 qualities. These are virtue, passion, and dullness. The Sattva Guna represents the truth, wisdom, beauty, and godness. The Raja sign fireness, attractiveness, violence, energy, and while the Tamas is darkness, foolishing, gloomy, and unhappy, etc. Yoga by Patanjali. According to yoga, the God is not the creator but an exalted soul which has existed although without ever having merged with the matter. In this system, the self-control and self-mortification is supreme. The salvation in this system is by the practicing the following 8 things. Yama, self-control. Niyama, observance. Asanas, postures. Pranayama, control of breath. Pratyahara, restraint. Dharana, steadying in the mind. Dhyana, meditation. Samadhi, deep meditation. Purva Mimamsa by Jaimini. The Mimamsa system is the philosophy of interpretation, application and use of the text of the Snahiti and Brahmana portions of Vedas. It recognizes 2 parts of salvation. One is concerned with the Karma Kanda and other with the Jnana Kanda of the Vedas, the Smatihas, Brahmanas and the Upanishads respectively. Uttar Mimamsa, Badrayan. The ancient Indian thoughts on philosophy reached its peak in the philosophy of Vedanta. Shankara's commentaries of Upanishads, Brahma Sutra and Bhagavad Gita are important for understanding the Vedanta philosophy. Shankara held that all workers teach the ultimate reality. For example, Brahma is one. The Vedanta philosophy expanded by Shankara is known as Advaita Vedanta for the purpose of carrying out the work of creation, perseveration and destruction. God assumes 3 distinct names and forms, namely Brahma, Vishnu and Rudra. The doctrine clearly recognizes that the highest level of truth is the whole world and all exists is Maya and illusion, a dream or a mirage and is figment of imagination. The only reality is Brahma. The 6 systems are usually coupled in pairs. The second system of each pair is more a mythology than a metaphysical school. They are Samkhya and Yoga, Vaisesika and Nyaya, and Vedanta and Mimamsa. Some other. Apart from these, there were some other philosophy also which are the result of continuous quest by the sages. The important systems are Charvaka, Jaina, Buddha, Ajvak, etc. The Charvaka system believes only in materialism. Enjoyment of pleasures are the only objects in life. There is no life beyond death, no heaven or hell, no law of karma, and no rebirth. The Charvaka system does not believe in soul, God or any other life beyond the present one. Chapter 4. Religious Movement, 6th century BC. The period between 7th and 5th century BC was a turning point in the intellectual and spiritual development of the whole world, for it witnessed the emergence of early philosophers of Greek, the great Hebrew poets Confucius in China and Zoroaster in Persia. It was at this time that Jainism and Buddhism arose in India, each based on a distinctive set of doctrines and each laying down distinctive rules of conduct for attaining salvation. We come to know of about 62 religious sects, many of which were based on local customs and rituals. Both Jainism and Buddhism are organized as ascetic orders and brotherhoods. Asceticism, in fact, has its origin in the Vedic thought and has been directly encouraged by the Upanishads. Some of these were Ajvikas, Nigranthas, Jatilaks, etc. Some of the prominent teachers of these sects were Purana Kasyapa, Makhili Gosal, Ajit Kesha Kambalin, Nigantha Natputta, and Sanjaya Balaputta. Causes of new movement. The Vedic philosophy had lost its original purity. The Vedic religion has become very complex and degenerated into superstition, dogmas, and rituals. Supremacy of the Brahmanas created unrest in the society, and Kshatriya reacted against the Brahmanical domination. Introduction of a new agricultural economy in eastern India, the desire of Vaishyas to improve their social position with the increase in their economic position due to the growth of trade. Buddhism. Gautam Buddha. Buddhism was founded by Gautam Buddha. He was born on the Vaisakha Purnima day at Lumbini, near Kapilavastu, capital of the Sakya Republic, in 563 BC. His family name was Gautama, who was born in Sakya clan. His father, Suddhodan, was the king of Sakya Republic. His mother was Maya Devi, who died after 7 days of his birth. The popular legend has it that an astrologer predicted that Gautama would either be a great Chakravarti Samrat or a great Sannyasam. Fearing his son's reflective cast of mind, his father married him at an early age to be a beautiful Yasodhara, from whom he had a son Rahul. Gautama was horrified at the sight of an old man, a deceased person, a dead body, and then being attracted by the saintly appearance of an ascetic. One night he left his home, wife, and son, and renounced the worldly life. Thereafter, 6 years of profound meditation led to the discovery of truths. Gautama became to the Buddha, the enlightened or left home at the age of 29 and attained nirvana at the age of 35 at Bodh Gaya. The Buddha extended the teaching of two elder contemporaries, Alara Kalama and the Utlaka. According to Buddhism, there is no self, no God, no soul, and no spirit. Once Buddha himself said if women were not admitted into the monasteries, Buddhism would have continued for 1,000 years. But because this admission has been granted, it would last only 500 years. Buddha delivered his first sermon at Sarnath. He attained Mahaparinirvana at Kausinara in 483 BC. 5 great events of Buddha's life and their symbols: birth, lotus and bull; great renunciation, horse; nirvana, Buddhi tree; first sermon, Dharma chakra or wheel; parinirvana or death, stupa. Buddhist scriptures. The Vinaya Pitaka mainly deals with rules and regulations which the Buddha promulgated. It describes in detail the gradual development of the Sangha. An account of the life and teaching of the Buddha is also given. The Sutta Pitaka consists chiefly of discourse delivered by Buddha himself on different occasions. Few discourses delivered by Sariputta Ananda, Mughal Kanna and others also included in it. It lays down the principles of Buddhism. The Abhidhamma Pitaka contains the profound philosophy of the Buddha's teaching. It investigates mind and matter to help the understanding of things as they truly are. The Khandakas contain regulation on the course or life in the monastic order and have 2 sections, the Mahavagga and the Kulavagga. The third part, the Parivara, is an insignificant composition by a Ceylonese monk. Among the non-canonical literature, Milindapano, Deepavamsa and Mahavamsa are important. The latter two are the great chronicles of Ceylon. The profounders. Asvaghosha, contemporary of Kanishka. He was poet, dramatist, musician, scholar and debater. Nagarjuna. He was a friend and contemporary of Satavahana king Yajnasri Gautamiputra of Andhra. He propounded the Madhyamika school of Buddhist philosophy, popularly known as Sunyavada. Asanga and Vasubandhu, two brothers who flourished in the Punjab region in 4th century AD. Asanga was the most important teacher of the Yagochara and Vijayananda school founded by his guru Maitreyananda. Vasubandhu's greatest work, Abhindamarkosa, is still considered an important encyclopedia of Buddhism. Buddhaghosa, who lived in the 5th century AD, was a great Pali scholar. The commentaries and the Visuddhimagga written by his are a great achievement in the post-Tripitaka literature. Dinnaga, the last mighty intellectual of the 5th century, is well known as the founder of the Buddhist logic. Dharmakriti, lived in the 7th century AD, was another great Buddhist logician. He was a substantial philosophical thinker of a dialectation. Buddhist philosophy, idealism, two sources of valid knowledge, perception and inference. Doctrine of dependent origination, Pratisamutpada, central theory of Buddhist philosophy. It tells us that in the empirical warrior dominated by the intellect, everything is relative, conditional, dependent, subject to birth and death, and therefore impermanent. Theory of momentariness, Kshanabhanga and impermanence. It tells that everything in this world is merely a conglomeration of perishable qualities according to it. Things that can produce effect exist, and whatever cannot produce effect has no existence. Four noble truths. The world is full of sorrows. Desire is root cause of sorrows. If desire is conquered, all sorrows can be removed. Desire can be removed by following the eightfold path. The eightfold path: right understanding, right speech, right livelihood, right mindfulness, right thought, right action, right effort, and right concentration. Buddhist councils. First council at Buddhist councils. First council at Sattapanni cave near Rajgriha under the chairmanship of Mahakassapa and patronage of Ajatasatru. Result settlement of the Sutta and the Vinaya Pitaka. Second council at Vaisali under the chairmanship of Sabakami and patronage of Kalasoka. The monks of Vaisali wanted some change into the rites. It resulted into division of the Buddhist Sangha into the Orthodox Theravadins and the unorthodox Mahasangahanics. Third council at Pataliputra under the patronage of Asoka and the chairmanship of Moggaliputra Tissa. Result: establishment of the Stavarivandas as the true follows. Final completion of the Tripitakas. A third one was added into the earlier two, Abhidhamma Pitaka. Fourth council in Kashmir under the patronage of Kanishka and the chairmanship of Vasumitra, helped by Asvaghosha, other of Buddha Charitar. Results: division of all the Buddhists into two major sects, Mahayanist and Hinayanist. In Buddhism, Hinayana, its followers believed in the original teaching of Buddha. They sought individual salvation through self-discipline and meditation. They did not believe in idol worship. Hinayana, like Jainism, is a religion without God, karma taking the place of God. Nirvana is regarded as the extinction of all. The oldest school of Hinayana Buddhism is the Stavirvada, or the doctrine of the elders. Its Sanskrit counterpart, which is more philosophical, is known as Sarvastivada, or the doctrine which maintains the existence of all things, physical as well as mental. Gradually from Sarvastivada or Vaibhasika branched on another school called Sautatrika, which was more critical in outlook. Mahayana. Its followers believed in the heavenliness of Buddha and sought the salvation of all through the grace and help of Buddha and Bodhisattvas. Believes in idol worship. Believes that nirvana is not a negative session and miserly but a position state of bliss. Mahayana had two chief philosophical schools, the Madhyamika and the Yogacara. The former took a line midway between the uncompromising realism of Hinayunism and the idealism of Yogacara. The Yogacara school, founded by Maitreyanada, completely rejected the realism of Hinayana and maintained absolute idealism. Vajrayanism. Its followers believed that salvation could be attained by acquiring the magical power which they called Vajra. The chief divinities of the new sect were the Taras, who should be compelled rather than persuaded to bestow magical power on the worshipper by performing the Tantra within the Yantra. Three Ratnas: Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Contribution to society. The doctrine of ahimsa, so strongly stressed, devoutly preached, and sincerely practiced by the Buddhists, was incorporated in Hinduism of later days. The practice of worshipping personal gods, making their images, and erecting temples in their honor became a part of the later day Hinduism. Buddhism proved to be one of the greatest civilizing forces which India gave to the neighboring countries. Buddhism broke the isolation of India and helped in establishment of intimate contacts between India and foreign countries. Jainism. The names of two Tirthankaras, namely Rishabhanath and Aristhanemi, find mention in Rigveda. Vayu Purana and Bhagavad Purana mention Rishabha as the incarnation of Narayana. The Jain tradition traces Jainism to a remote antiquity represented by a succession of 24 Tirthankaras. The first Tirthankara was Rishabhanath. We know a little more about the 23rd Tirthankara, Parsva, who was the son of Ishkavaku king Avasena of Kasi and was born to the daughter of Narvanam, king of Kaushantala. Vardhaman Mahavira. Vardhaman Mahavira was the last Tirthankara. He was born in the village Kundagrama near Vaishali about 540 BC. His father Siddhartha was the head of famous Kshatriya Jnatika clan and his mother Trisala was the sister of Chetaka, an eminent Richavi noble of Vaishali. Chetaka's daughter was married to Bimbisara, the king of Magadha. Mahavira was married to Yashoda and lived a life of a householder. He had a daughter also. Vardhamana left his home and became an ascetic at the age of 30. During the next 12 years, he practiced most rigorous asceticism. At the age of 42, he attained Kaivalya, the supreme knowledge and final deliverance from the bonds of pleasure, the plane. At Jrimbika Grama, henceforth he came to be known as Mahavira and Jina of the Conqueror. His followers came to be known as Jainas. Originally, they were designed at Nigranthas, free from fetters. He was called Jaina or Jitendriya, Nigrantha, and Mahavira. Mahavira spent the remaining 30 years of his life is preaching. He passed away at Pavapuri in 468 BC at the age of 72, born in 540 BC at Kundagrama near Vaishali. 5 main teachings: non-injury, ahimsa; non-lying, satya; non-stealing, asiteva; non-possessing, aparigraha; observe continence, brahmachari. The first 4 principles of the Parsavana and the 5th brahmacharya was included by Mahavira. Sacred literature. The sacred literature of the Svetambaras is written in the form of Pankrit called Ardhamagdi and may be classified as follows: the 12 Angas, the 12 Upangas, the 10 Parikarnas, the 6 Cheda Sutras, the 4 Mala Sutras. Jain philosophy. Syadvada. All our judgments are necessarily relative, conditional, and limited. According to Syadvada, 7 modes of prediction are possible: absolute affirmation and absolute negation both are wrong. All judgments are conditional. Aneka Antavada. The Jaina metaphysics is a realistic and relativistic pluralism. It is called Anekantavada, or the doctrine of the manyness of reality. Matter are regarded as separate and independent realities. Main principles of Jainism: rejected the authority of the Vedas and Vedic rituals, believed in karma and the transmigration of soul, did not believe in the existence of God, laid great emphasis on equanimity. 3 Ratnas: right faith, right knowledge, right conduct. Jaina councils. By the end of the 4th century BC, there was a serious famine in the Ganges Valley, leading to a great exodus of many Jaina monks to the Deccan and South India, along with Bhadra Bhanu and the Chandragupta Mayurya. They returned to the Gangetic Valley after 12 years. The leader of the group which stayed back at Magadha was Thulabhanu. The changes that took place in the code of conduct of the followers of Stulabahu led to the division of the Jains into Digambaras and Svetambaras. First council was held at Pataliputra and Stulabahu in the beginning of the 3rd century BC and resulted in the completion of 12 Angas to replace the lost 14 Purvas. Second council was held at Vallabhi in the 5th century AD under the leadership of Devardahi Kashmasra Amana and resulted in final completion of 12 Angas and 12 Upangas. Chapter 5. The rise of the Magadha kingdom, 600 to 300 BC. Period 600 to 325 BC is a major landmark. North India experienced far-reaching changes in political, socio-economic and cultural life. Mahagovinda Sutta of Digha Nikaya described the shape of India as rectangular in the north and triangular in the south, just like a bullock cart. The list of Janapadas preserved in the Jain text Bhagavati Sutra and Sutrakanta, great grammarian Panini's Ashtadhyayi, Bauddhayan Dharma Sutra, and in Mahabharata. The Buddhist Nikayas mentioned the 5-fold division of India into Uttarapat, North, Madhya Desha, Prachi, Dakshinapada, and Aparanta, which confirms that the geographical unity of India had been visualized much before the 6th century BC. Towns and cities like Sravasti, Ayodhya, Kapilavastu, Varanasi, Vaishali, Rajgir, Pataliputra, etc. grew in the middle Gangetic Valley, marking the second urbanization in the Indian subcontinent. Extension and improvements in agriculture due to the regular use of iron implements. All these economic changes resulted in the growth of the institution of private pottery, which in turn led to sharp economic inequalities. further strengthening of this fourfold system during this period. Sharp distinction between the Dvija twice born, consisting of the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, and the non-Dvija Sudras. Both civil and criminal law came to be on the Varna. The use of coined money is more frequently associated with urban centers. The coin of highest value in circulation was the silver Satamana, but the more standard coins were the silver Karshapana and the copper Masha and Kakani. The Karshapana is said to equal 16 mushans and was divided into a half and a quarter. The Kakani was half a Masha and the smallest denomination was the Ardha Kakani. The distribution of punch-marked coins which were in the circulation from 6th century BC to 2nd century BC showed that by the 4th century BC there was only one currency for the whole of India. It shows political and economic unification for the entire territory. Magadhan ascendancy. Of the 16 Mahajanapadas, Magadha, Kosala, Vatsa and Avanti were more powerful. They fought amongst themselves for political preeminence for about 100 years. Ultimately, Magadha, under the leadership of Bimbisars and Ajashatru, emerged victorious. The victory of Magadha was a victory for the monarchical system, which was formally established in the Ganges Plain. Haryanka dynasty. Magadhan ascendancy began with Bimbisara of the Haryanka dynasty. Haryanka dynasty was founded in Magadha by Bimbisara after overthrowing the Brihadrastas. He married the princess of Kosala, Vaishali and Madhya, which helped him his expansionist policy. His one and only conquest was the Anga. He also gained a part of Kashi, as his marriage with the sister of King Prasenjit of Kosala, Bimbasara, was murdered by his own son. Ajatasattu. He defeated Prasenjit, married his daughter and annexed Kashi. Ajatasattu was succeeded by Udayin, who founded the new capital at Pataliputra. Sisunaga dynasty. The Haryanka dynasty was succeeded by the Sisunaga dynasty, which destroyed the power of Avanti and incorporated in the Magadhan Empire. Thus, the 100-year-old rivalry between Avanti and Magadha came to an end. The Puranas take Sisanga to be the founder of the royal line to which Bimbasara belonged and hence calls in the Sisunaga dynasty Kalasoka was the son and successor of Sisunaga. Nanda dynasty. Kalasoka, the son of the successor of Sisunaga, was succeeded by a barber named Mahapadmananda, who founded a new dynasty known as the Nandas. Nandas annexed Kalinga to the empire. Mahapadmananda was the most important king of his dynasty. The Nandas are said to have checked Alexander's army from advancing towards Magadha. Their rule was supplemented by that of the Mayuras. Mahapadma defeated and destroyed the formed Kshatriyas families such as the Pauravas and the Ikshakus and the Pradyotas, who were ruling in Kausambi, Kaushala and Avanti, and establishment an empire which included the greater part of northern India. Political changes. From of government, hereditary monarchy was the predominant form, though republics were in existence. Formation of a standing army on a solid basis. Large-scale use of elephants by kings of East India. Establishment of the fiscal system on a firm basis. Regular collection of taxes. Collector of a land revenue known as Balisadaka or Saulkika. Foreign invasion. Persian invasion. Cyrus of Persia was the greatest conqueror in the history of the ancient Orient. He was the first foreign conqueror who led an expedition into India. All Indian tribes to the west of the Indus right up to the Kabul region submitted and paid him tribute. It was the region of Daris that they have positive evidence of the extension of Achaemenian rule in the northwestern part of India. Two inscriptions of the monarch mention Hindu as a part of his domination. Herodotus, the Greek historian, tells us that in 517 BC, Darius sent a naval expedition to explore the valley of the Sindhu River. Alexander's invasion on India, 327 to 325 BC. The defeat of Achaemenian king Darius III in the hands of Alexander became a turning point. Alexander dismantled the Persian Empire, conquered most of the Western Asia. After the conquest of the Persian Empire, Alexander marched to India through the Khyber Pass in 326 BC. Once Alexander reached the India soil, the king of Taxila near Rawalpindi in Pakistan, offered to help Alexander. Only a couple of Indian princes followed the ignoble example of Taxila. Identification of Sandrocothas or Androcothas of Greek sources with that of Chandragupta Maurya and fixing 326 BC as the date of Chandragupta's accession to the throne has become the sheet anchor of the chronological framework of Indian history. Battle of Hydaspes. Alexander crossed the Hydaspes river in dark and took Porus on surprise. A fierce battle was fought in which Porus displayed unprecedented courage but lost the battle. Alexander secured the allegiance of this brave king by restoring his kingdom and adding to the territories of 15 republican states, which their 5,000 cities and villages without number. In course of his advance to the next river, peace, Alexander had to fight hard with the Khathai, whose population amounted to 17,000 killed and 17,000 captured. After crossing the Indus, Alexander proceeded towards Taxila. When he was about 7 kilometers from Taxila, Ambi came forward to greet Alexander and recognized him as his sovereign. Alexander's advance was arrested on the bank of the beach of his soldier mutilated and refused to proceed further. It is difficult to say whether this insubordination of the soldiers was due to merely weariness or partly to the fear inspired by the mighty empire of Nandas. Near the confluence of the Jhelum with the Chenab, he had to fight with a confederacy of republican states led by the Malloy and the Oxydraci. All the towns of the Malvas became citadel resistance. In them 5,000 Brahmanas left the pen for the sword and died fighting, and only a few being taken prisoners. Though Alexander's stay in India was brief, it was an important influence by curbing the fierce tribes who inhabited the hills and passes northwest India. He paved the way of the rise of a united empire under the Mauryas. Alexander's campaign opened up and the reformed a number of the trade routes between north and western India via Afghanistan. And Iran to Asia Minor and the ports along the eastern Mediterranean. The Mauryan Empire. The Mauryan Empire was the first and one of the greatest empires that were established on the Indian soil. The growth of Magadha culminated in the emergence of the Mauryan Empire. Chandragupta Maurya, who founded the empire, extended control as far northwest as Afghanistan and Balochistan, and his grandson Ashoka, arguably the most famous ruler of early India, conquered Kalinga. Chandragupta Maurya was the first ruler who unified entire India under the political unit. When historians began reconstructing early Indian history in the 19th century, the emergence of the Mauryan Empire was recorded as a major landmark. Also, some of the archaeological finds associated with the Mauryas, including were concluding stone sculpture. The Mauryas, including were concluding stone sculpture cited, were considered to be the examples of the spectacular archetypical of empires. Ashokan inscription, very different from that of the most other rulers, suggested that Ashoka was more powerful and industrious, as also more humble than later rulers who adopted grandiose titles. So we can say that there are many sources to know about the Mauryan Empire. They are secular literacy sources. Arthashastra. It was authored by Kautilya, divided into 15 Adhikarnas, of which the first 5 deal with Tantra or internal administration of the state, 8 deal with Avapa or its relatives with neighboring states, and the last 2 are miscellaneous in character. It is the most important literary source of the Mayuras. It is a treatise on government and economic policy. The Arthashastra gives us detailed information about the administrative system of the Mauryan Empire. The treatise lays down various rules that could be formulated for a ruling monarch. It laid down strategies for a well-planned state economy. The work is concerned with all the topics that deal with the internal administration and foreign relations. Indica. It was written by Megasthenes, but is not available now. Megasthenes was the ambassador of Seleucus Nicator in the court of Chandragupta Mayura. Indica is the foremost among all the foreigners' accounts for Mauryans. Indica has served only as questions in the text of classical Greek writers and Latin writers. It refers the Mauryan administration, 7-caste system, absence of salary and usury in India, etc. It has to be treated with great caution. Megasthenes mention a commit with 6 subcommittees for coordinating military activity. Of these, one looked after the navy, the second managed and the transport and provisions, the third as responsible for foot soldiers, the fourth for horses, and the fifth for charities, and the sixth for elephants. The activities of the second subcommittee were rather varied, arranging for bullock carts to carry equipment, procuring food for soldiers and food for animals, and recruiting servants and artisans to look after the soldier. Religious literary sources. Puranas, that gives us chronology and list of Mauryan kings. Buddhist literature. Jatakas reveal a general picture of socio-economic conditions of Mauryan period. Digha Nikaya helps in determining the influence of Buddhist ideas on Maurya polity. Dipavamsa and Mahavamsa describe the part played by Ashoka in spreading Buddhism to Sri Lanka. Jain literature. Paristita Pavan talks about the conversion of Chandragupta Maurya to Jainism. Archaeological sources. Ashokan edicts. There are 14 major and 3 minor rock edicts, 7 major and 3 minor pillar edicts, and 3 cave edicts located at several places in the Indian subcontinent. They decipheration was done by James Prinsep of the EICO in 1837. Majority of them are the nature of Ashoka's proclamations to the public at large. 3 languages but 4 scripts were used in these edicts. Prakrit in Brahmi in mainland in India. Prakrit in Kharoshthi in the northwest, Greek and Aramic languages in their scripts in Afghanistan. Other inscriptions: Nagarjuna Hill Cave inscription of Dasharatha, Jangad Rock inscription of Rudraman. Material remains: pottery, use of northern black polished ware, NBPW. Wooden plates and halls are the other material remains. Chandragupta Maurya 321 to 297 BC. In 305 BC, Chandragupta defeated Seleucus Nicator, who surrounded a vast territory. Megasthenes was a Greek ambassador sent to the court of Chandragupta Maurya by Seleucus. He occupied the region north of the Narmada, but 305 BC saw him in the campaign against Seleucus Nicator with the Treaty of 303 BC, concluding the war in favor of the Mauryas. By the treaty, Chandragupta made a gift of 500 elephants to Seleucus and obtained the Trans-Indus region. Chandragupta became a Jain and went to Shravan-Bilgola with Bhadrabahu, where he died by slow starvation. Under Chandragupta Maurya, for the first time, the whole of northern India was united. Trade flourished, agriculture was regulated, weights and measures were standardized, and money came into use. The Jaungar rock inscription of Rudradman says that a dam on the Sudarshana lake for irrigation was constructed by Pushyagupta, a provisional governor of Chandragupta Maurya. Later, Yamanraja Tushpaha excavated canals for irrigation during Ashoka's reign. Bindusara extended the kingdom further and conquered by south as far as Mysore. Bindusar asked Antiochus I of Syria to send some sweet wine, dried figs, and a sophist. Antiochus I sent wine and figs, but politically replied that Greek philosophers are not for sale.